Hi, I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities via a number of different modalities. This show is one of them. We also have a like minded group of people committed to spiritual growth and transformation on Facebook, and you can find us at liveauthentically.today/FB. I'm also super pumped that I am currently promoting my first book, my debut book, SOAR, SOAR. That's on Amazon, and it's a spiritual experiential journey and shows how I partnered with the universe to create my new reality. So I'm super excited that on my show with me today, I have Deirdre Fay. Hey, Deirdre.
Hey, Pam, that's so great. Congratulations on your book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to have you here. I know you have a really powerful message to share with our audience. But before we dive into that, I start my shows off with the same question. And that question is, how do you live authentically every day?
To be authentic, I am not always authentic. Sometimes I'm just cranky and crabby. And I guess that's part of being authentic, is just living a life. Today was, I was back to back. And so, what do I need right now? And I went outside I had like half an hour and just walked and went up. I have this big steep cliff behind me. I went up the steep cliff and just took a moment to take in the beauty and came back down. And those are the little things that really refresh me and get me reconnected to my own heart.
So is authenticity, a place that you've always lived, or was there a time in your life where you didn't feel
Oh
like you were?
boy, no, 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 no. I don't think I was brought up that way. I can remember my dad saying I was too spontaneous, too impulsive. I was too. So I
Mhm,
remembered like contracting and living smaller and smaller and not expressing myself. And it's
mhm.
taken me, most of my life to really reclaim myself and come forward. I feel like I'm more that way now. Really, it feel safe to express myself, to know what I need, and share myself. And I think that's the gift of living an authentic life.
I agree. It's showing up as you are and not worrying about, judgment from other people, self-judgment, etc. And I always say, you know what, you're not to anything. Like, unless you're being rude or unless you're being like unkind, you're not to anything. If people are telling you you're to this, you're to that, then find new people, right? There's 7.6 billion
Exactly.
people in the world. Just be yourself, and the right people who are supposed to be in your life will align with you and show up. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm super excited. We're going to be talking about you and this amazing work that you do in the world. But would love to have you just start off with a little intro, kind of a brief,
Mhm.
introduction on who you are and a little bit about the work that you do in the world.
Sure. Well, I am professionally trained as a therapist, but mostly what I do now is coaching people to live, taking their trauma and turning it into a heartful compassion. What I've found is that the some of the old forms of therapy is about going deep into the pain, and people end up getting stuck there. And what
Mhm,
I'm interested in is people taking that stuck place and actually transforming it into a life of compassion, understanding, full-heartedness, living with what I call an unshakable heart. And that comes from being able to build a solid, steady, secure self inside so that we can withstand everything and anything that happens in life, because life does bring us all kinds of things. So that's the work that I do. I've written a number of books. I have my own trauma history, which came up when I was living at a yoga ashram. I didn't know I had a trauma history, but in that safe world where I was doing a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation, training for triathlons, I was really in my body. It just came out. That was back in the 80s. And at that time, we didn't really know how to deal with trauma. And so I spent a lot of time looking at how do I do it? How do I heal myself? And
mhm,
then working with different therapists and then becoming professionally involved with that. I worked at Bessel van der Kolk's clinic, who's a New York Times bestseller author. He had a clinic for years in Boston. So I worked there and then supervised there. And really, my goal is to help people have a more fulfilling and satisfying life.
So when you talk about trauma, just for our viewers and listeners to give them something to identify with, what types, can you give me some examples of types
Oh,
of trauma
sure.
you're referring to?
There can be physical trauma, emotional trauma, psychological trauma. There can be sexual trauma, you name it. For a while, I worked with every kind of trauma, possibly even, an Amtrak driver who's driving the train and somebody jumps in front of their train and gets killed. That's a huge trauma to somebody. So it could be a car accident. But what I've been focusing on more lately is the reason why those traumas, those big traumas, don't heal is because of the underlying attachment needs, the underlying relational needs that we all have didn't get met and solidified. And so people grew up living on top of themselves, if you want to put it that way. They couldn't really access themselves because nobody helped attune to them. So they didn't put the pieces together in a certain way. And those pieces getting put together, we know from the research, happens between 0 and 3. And so if we didn't have good relational modeling early up, then we build a self on top of it, but it's not connected to ourselves. So that's often why people have a hard time living authentically.
Mm-hmm. So are there other kind of day-to-day traumas too, in addition to these big traumas that you talk about? Are there
Well, the
more
day-to-day trauma could be of a relationship falling apart. A divorce is a huge trauma for people. People being mad at each other, conflict, not being able to repair that conflict. That can leave really big impacts on people, especially if they have a lifetime of people not getting along well. They freeze up inside. They want to get out of Dodge. They run away. They fight. They get reactive and angry. So those are the kind of things that show up, and they're more quote unquote subtle trauma, but they have such a long-lasting impact on us.
And I would imagine you really have to go back and to the origin, right? And just do that deep healing work. Otherwise, they're going to continue to ensue, and you're going to have these patterns in your life. Is that true?
Definitely the patterns. It depends. Some people have to go back to the origin, but the key thing is really to be here in this moment and connected to the past and realize oh my God, that's why it's so bad. That's why this is feeling so bad inside, because I didn't have those needs met back then. And when we link them together, the past and the present, it's like things line up and it's easier to let go.
So I'm curious, how do you help people process dealing with regret? Because that's something that I see in my work. A lot of my clients bring up regrets. I wish I would have whatever 10 years ago, or I wish I wouldn't have, whatever 5 years ago. And, my response is always, well, you were doing the best that you could do from that particular point in evolution, right? You were making your decisions based on the knowledge and the wisdom and the life experiences you had up to that point. And any one of us could look back at a prior point in our lives and wish we would have done something differently. But that's not the mindset that helps us move forward. But I do see a lot of people get stuck there. They kind of, they're kind of stuck in the mud, spinning their wheels, and they can't get past the regret. So I'm curious I realize it's different for everyone, but can you just kind of give me a high level, broad brush
Absolutely. And you
explanation?
bring up a really good point because well, it's part of the transformational model that I teach a lot, is that regret is what I might call a protest. We're upset at something. We wish it were different. Well, what inside of you, what inside of me knows that it should be differently, right? If I'm saying, I wish I had done this, or I wish it had been different, or I wish he, she, or it had been different, what is it that our body, mind, and heart was needing at that moment? And can I begin to orient in that direction, let go of the past? The place where people get stuck is they just cling and they're tethered to this pain of the past and they can't shift forward. But when people start orienting to, well, what would I want? What would be more satisfying, more nourishing? And then how do I step by step make a granular process to get to that? People start changing that.
And so what I realize every situation is different, but are there certain elements that seem to be kind of ubiquitous with the majority of your clients that you work with, elements of their journey, elements of, things that they bring to?
Well, I think maybe most fundamental is the need and longing to love and be loved. Everybody wants that. People have huge hearts and they want to love. and they want to be loved. And if they don't, they start protecting themselves and doing all kinds of stuff to make themselves smaller and more inaccessible. Actually, it makes it
Right.
harder to love them. But they're doing the best they can. They're trying to protect themselves. I would say that's the biggest one, the biggest issue that people come.
That's
Yeah.
a huge one. That is expansive and all encompassing. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are some of the kind of the behavioral signs or symptoms that people could be experiencing when they have that deep unmet need to be loved?
Right. I just led a 2-day workshop last weekend, and there was a wonderful couple that was there. And they were talking about how they're fighting each other all the time. But what do they really want? They want to love and be loved. But it's almost like on a conscious level they want certain things, but on the unconscious level they want you to be different,
Mm-hmm.
something to change, something really it's to be different. And it's aligning that inside. So you want it to be different. Well, how do you want it to be different? And can I change myself rather than trying to change you? And so much of what I teach about and came from years of being with clients individually and their couples and families is that what happens is we want the outside to be different. So I have a different feeling inside. And I think of that as a developmental step of a child. Every child should have had the right circumstances outside, the right attunement, the right kind of attendance, so they could get those needs met inside, so they could learn who they were. But the research shows that 1 out of 4 of us did not get that. Huge number of us who didn't get that. The question then is, as I grow up, can I learn how to be with myself, acknowledge my needs inside myself, so that then I can be in relationship with you outside? Otherwise, that's where the struggle is.
Right.
It's a setup.
Right. Right. So what are some of the protective mechanisms that people put into place that you see?
Anger comes out a lot. People get reactive. They get reactive outside. They get reactive inside. They
Mhm.
get self-critical. You name it, all those kind of um, psychological behaviors come out. People can withdraw with painful problem in a relationship or in connection where somebody disappears. We call it ghosting now, right? When you just disappear out of the connection. Very, very painful for people. Because withdrawing is doing the best they can. They're doing the only thing they know how to do for survival, relational survival, but it
Yeah.
doesn't work. It doesn't get their needs met, doesn't get the other person's need met. So those are huge ones that happen. Acting as if, pretending like everything's okay when inside you're dying, you're upset, you're hurt, having that level of disconnect. Those are main ways that people show up.
Is your work based on the work or the teachings of a particular psychological, theory or psychologist? Is it Jung? Is it Sigmund Freud? I mean, what elements of
Wow, that's so
psychology?
great. I think most of us now are much more integrative, and my work comes from what we call the ancient wisdom traditions.
Okay.
The yoga psychology was a huge influence. I lived in an ashram for 6 years,
Mhm.
meditated for, I don't know, 40 some odd years at this point. So there's that whole body of work. Mysticism influences me deeply. And then all the contemporary trauma models and attachment theory. So those are the three main things. Attachment theory is relatively new, but it's extremely well researched from the 50s on up. And that body of work about what happens between people and why do we get impacted? Why do we get hurt? Why can't we change some of these patterns because they're so early built into us, imprinted? That's what makes it complicated.
And what is the most challenging aspect of what you do? What do you find to be the most challenging?
Hmm. Gosh, I think what makes me most sad is when people don't want to change, when people don't want to look at themselves. That breaks my heart. And of
Yeah.
course, that still happens where I know people who just dig in their heels and won't give an inch. They won't lay down the sword of their upset or their anger or their victimhood or where they were hurt in the past. And then they're kind of doomed to live a life that's not satisfying to them. And I guess that's challenging. It's just really sad.
Right. And so how do you get to a place of accepting that and not allowing that to hold
Right.
you, to kind of hold you back or bring you down? How do you move through that?
Through a lot of forgiveness of them, compassion for those parts of me that have a hard time changing and haven't wanted to. So really opening my heart, creating room for all of us. I mean, that's the human dilemma, isn't it? We don't want to change. We don't want to grow. I go into the transformational vortex kicking and screaming. It's like, oh no, I don't want to change. I don't want to why do I have to do it? And then I relax. It's just years of practice of being like, okay, now I'll do it. And then
Mhm.
shifting. But if somebody can't do it, it's really sad. It's really hard. And I know what that's like.
Yeah, that totally resonates with me because someone asked me recently, what's the most challenging aspect of what I do? And it's precisely that. It's watching people not choose growth, right? Because
Mhm.
if they're electing to stay the same, they're effectively making a conscious decision to not embark on the growth trajectory.
Right.
And
Right.
that does make me sad. That's hard for me to sit and watch people spin their wheels, stay stuck in the mud, and continue living a life that is fraught with pain and suffering when it's just literally one decision away, but it's not that easy. I always say, it's hard. I think that initial decision to embark on this path of growth can be challenging because we're all pulled towards comfort and familiarity. And we want to stick with what we know, even if it is negativity, even if it is pain. And I think some people have, and again, I say this with no judgment, but have built a life around the pain and around the trauma and around, the adverse, the challenging things in their life. But and I have to remind myself, not everyone is meant to awaken this lifetime. I mean, my belief system, I believe in reincarnation. I believe that we come to earth for the lessons, and our life experiences help us master the lessons. And some people may not be meant to awaken this journey. And so the best thing what helps me process it is I just tell myself the best thing I can do is just show love and compassion and support and kindness and really be a silent observer on their journey and not judge and not critique and not try to accelerate their growth and transformation. Just be here. And I think some of the greatest teachers in the world, the spiritual awakeners, leaders, thought leaders, et cetera, have just, they kind of just put out their buffet, right? They put out their buffet and allow people to come up to it and serve themselves when they're ready. But when we try to force feed people and try to accelerate them down this path, that's just a model that just it doesn't work. It has an expiration date if it even has, a life at all. So, but I agree with you. That is the aspect that's most challenging in this line of work.
I love what you said about not trying to push people into change, letting them do it. And I think, one of the things my Sufi teachers taught me is that how to let something move so organically that it just flows easily. And the next step then just opens up rather than trying to push it and force a change. And certainly in our world, we're so trained to be forceful and push for something. And yet sometimes the greatest growth happens, like you said, when we're a silent observer, when we're just holding somebody's heart and
Right.
the journey of life together.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, this journey of recovery through trauma, growth and transformation, et cetera, requires and calls for a very high level of vulnerability, which is scary, right? It's scary to kind of put yourself out there. So what do you say to the people who say, what, I want a better life. I want to change my life, but I'm scared.
Mhm. Well, we're all scared. We're scared. Life is scary. And the thing that is so true, I'm sure you found this, Pam, too, is that if we don't change, life will come in and force a change. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it is scary. So let's make friends with scariness. Let's figure out how to be with fear. Let's keep orienting toward what feels good and what's going to be more satisfying so that as we're moving, we're opening up inside, we're feeling more solid, steady, and secure. Because the next thing will happen. No other way around it.
Right. And I think that's the whole key is really just getting in front of it, right? Getting in front of it, making sure your pitcher is not only full but overflowing so that when life does rock you,
Right.
you're not completely just stripped to the core, that you do have the tools and the resources and the lifestyle and the set mindset to move forward in a healthy and positive way and realize that life is
Beautiful.
happening for you, not to you, right? It's what helps us step into and maintain that hero mindset rather than the victim mindset.
Beautiful. Beautifully said.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else? I know I wanted to take a little bit of a different direction in this podcast, which I'm super pumped about because it really does speak to your authenticity. Before we do that, I would like to see if there's anything else you'd like to share about the work that you do or your practice, if you'd like to let people know where they
No,
can.
I don't see people individually now. I have very few clients that I've had for years. Mostly I do coaching groups and supporting people as they move forward in their life and linking up inside so that their outside world is a real connected place to their inner world. That makes it easier. So that's the work that I do.
Love it. Thank you. All right. So ready to take a little bit of a different
Wherever you want to
turn
go,
here?
girl, I'm there.
Okay, let's go. All right. So I know you made a really courageous and super exciting and adventurous and authentic move recently. And I would love to hear about that because this is so in line with authenticity, that spontaneousness, that level of freedom. And would love to have you tell our viewers and listeners about the big move that you made recently.
Well, I'll be glad to talk about it. It's funny, it took a long time. I think that's why sometimes the changes we make are come come over time. They build on each other. So, my husband and I had been wanting to move out of the Boston area where we lived for a long time, in part because we both needed to get away from the wet and the cold in the winter time. And I
Mhm.
was developing arthritis in my hip, so it would get flare up, and it was so hard. Um, and yet there were, it's sometimes hard to pull away from what's known to go into the unknown.
Right.
And so we looked and we looked and we looked all over, and we spent a lot of time just connecting to our hearts and just, saying, where are we called to on the planet? And my mother-in-law has this idea of, well, she lived part-time when her husband, my husband's father was alive. They lived part of the time in Paris and part of the time in Florida. And she always had the sense of belongingness to Paris, to France.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, God, wouldn't that be nice? I never had that sense of belongingness to place. I thought, what would that be like to do that? So that was kind of the quest: is how do we have that? Yeah, we'd want more sun, we'd want more, but it was really this sense of wanting belongingness. And there were a whole series of events, some of it my hip, whatever. And then out of the kind of the blue, a friend of mine that was a realtor said, he had a house buyer, and would we be interested in showing our house? And we were like, okay. The house was a mess. It was nothing. We hadn't staged it, cleaned it, but they loved it, made a big offer, and that offer fell through, but that got us going. And we spent last summer putting our house on the market, sold within a weekend. We had 5 offers, yeah, way over what we were expecting. And then it was like, where do we go? And so we thought about France because of my mother-in-law being here, wanting to possibly support them. But Paris is lovely, but it's also cold and wet in the winter. And it was like, no. So we
Mhm.
landed in Nice, which is on the Riviera. And we thought, well, we'll stand there and just see where, else to go. But we got here, and within 24 hours, we were like, oh my God, this is it. And the amazing thing is I can literally walk around. We don't have a car anymore.
Okay.
And I feel so content. It's amazing. I feel like, wow, this is what that sense of belongingness is.
Mhm.
It's beautiful. It's physically beautiful. The people are great. It's amazing living here. So that's the big move that we made.
That's so exciting. And I love that you just, picked up and followed your heart and just put your roots down in a completely different part of the world. I love that.
I grew up in Europe, so maybe that was a little easier. And my husband had lived here for a period of time when he was a teenager. And of course, his mom is here. So some of that made it easier. But yeah, I just, it's so important to follow our heart, wherever our heart is guiding us. And it's kind of like this is the transformational model I teach us. I didn't want the cold anymore. I was pushing against it. I was protesting. No, 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 I don't want that. But what did I want? I was like, okay, warmth, sun, beauty. I remember thinking to myself, I'd love to live someplace where I feel like I'm on vacation all the time because I work a lot. But wouldn't it be nice to just feel like I'm in a vacation area?
Yeah, I think you found it.
We found it for sure. And it's so physically beautiful. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm sure. So do you have a guest room? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, we do, Pam, waiting for you when everybody can move again, right, and travel around.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be amazing. So that's awesome. I'm super excited for you. Well, that is authenticity at its finest for sure. So I'd love to see some pictures. So send some my way.
Oh, great. I'm glad. Well, I'm on Instagram. I post a lot there too at
Oh, cool.
DFay
Okay.
pics, DFAY pics. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I just wanted you to share that just because I think that's such a powerful display of authenticity and spontaneousness and really following your heart. So thank you.
that part is true. And
Yeah.
I feel like we're led. I think we're all being led if we're willing to relax and let that movement happen. Let our heart guide us from within.
I totally agree with that. And just recognizing where we're getting in our own way, what other external circumstances are getting in our way, right? Like fear and doubt and other people's opinions. It's like, you know what, just align, just, anchor on who you are, align with who you are, connect and see where your life takes you. And like you said, just relax. I think we're just so conditioned to want to control and orchestrate the events of our life. And really the magic happens when we just put what we want out there and just relax, right? And just surrender to the process.
And your book is all about soar.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I think that's something we all can do if we do the work from the inside out, right? And not waiting for our external circumstances to be
Right.
a certain way or waiting for other people to behave differently or waiting for, for certain, for the external world to fall into place. We do the work from the inside out. We can all get to that place of just relaxing and surrendering and soaring. So,
Beautiful message you have.
well, thank you. And likewise, you're doing such amazing work in the world. And I'm delighted that our paths have crossed. I expect and hope that this can be the beginning of a long friendship. So I would
Oh,
totally
yay, for
love to
sure.
stay in touch. If you're ever in the US, come visit me. I'm in Chicago. Um,
Love
so
Chicago.
so yeah, I know I do too. It's a great city. So anyways, yeah, so we'll go ahead and close out the show. But I wanted to officially say thank you again for being here. It's been such an amazing discussion and I've enjoyed every minute. And again, if you
Thanks, Pam.
thank you. And if you could just let people know where they can get in contact with you.
Sure. My website is dfay.com, dfay.com. And if you're interested in a safe way to heal trauma, I have a PDF you can get, dfay.com/safe guide. Safe guide.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. I believe that time is a choice, and I'm grateful that you've carved time out of your day to be here and listen to Deirdre's very powerful message. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye.